Florida governor and rumored 2024 presidential hopeful Ron DeSantis descends on Iowa. DeSantis is barnstorming across the state with a family picture.
If you look out the left side of the plane, you see beautiful panoramic views of the Lincoln Memorial, the reflecting pool, the Washington Monument. If you looked out the right side of the plane, you would look over the Potomac River. You saw a lot of very small, nondescript monuments arranged neatly over rolling hills in a place called Arlington National Cemetery. If you don't have people that are willing throughout our history to stand up, put on that uniform, risk their lives, and in many instances give that last full measure of devotion, then it isn't going to amount to very much. We must fight the good fight, we must finish the race, and we must keep the faith.
Former President Trump was also supposed to be in Iowa today for a massive rally, but apparently bad weather has postponed it about an hour ago. He's still posting his campaign message on Truth Social.
We got to make sure we have a great election, got to win big, and we're leading crooked Joe Biden by a lot. A lot. The polls are showing we're 7 points up, 8 points, 9 points, and even 11 points in one instance. So we're beating them all, and let's keep it that way.
Our very own Alexis McAdams is live in Hinton, Iowa. Alexis, what do you got for us?
But we were expecting to see that large rally in Des Moines earlier when we were heading out that way. And then there's been some not so great weather in the Iowa area that now the former president says has postponed that rally. But we did catch up with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Joey, who talked a lot about what he says has been a failure in the White House, calling out President Biden for a long list of things, including our southern border. Listen. Anything you want to say about the southern border and kind of what you're seeing out there? I know you addressed it just a few minutes ago.
It's a disaster, and it's a man-made disaster with bad policies. And so you obviously are going to continue to have bad things happen because they're not going to change the policy. But it should be shut. The border should just be shut down. I mean, that's what you do. You know, if this were like World War II era, they would have shut that down in 48 hours. Our country does not get things done anymore, and that's something that we're going to need to change.
And as you heard there, the Florida governor also even went on to say that he would immediately close the southern border. DeSantis talking, though, to a room full of supporters in Iowa. Border security, strengthening the military, education, and more all came up. Also touting his success of not closing down Florida during the pandemic. The governor also comparing Florida to Iowa, saying both states are on the right track. We were supposed to see former President Donald Trump, in the Hawkeye state to have that large rally. But this is all just a glimpse into what might be in store for 2024. As DeSantis and Trump lead in the early polls, voters we spoke with say they're just looking at their options.
He's a fighter, and he's fun to listen to. You never know quite what he's going to say. He's kind of a little bit like Trump that way, but just a little bit more palatable, I think, to people in Northwest Iowa. But, yeah, I'm excited to hear what he says. Maybe he'll announce today.
And he did not do that, but we're keeping a close eye on when or if he will announce. DeSantis, though, has now been endorsed by more than 36 GOP legislators just from Iowa alone. We'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Alexis. Hopefully you'd have told us if he did announce, thankfully. Kat, I want to go to you on this first. I guess DeSantis is going to win the day since Trump isn't going to be able to get there. But when we look at DeSantis, I mean, I think that last person they interviewed there kind of said it right. He is a lot like Trump, but maybe a little more palatable. Is that a winning campaign slogan?
I don't know if it's a winning campaign slogan or not. I don't think that anybody's a lot like Trump. I think Trump is Trump. I think that also for a while when people started talking about DeSantis as being a potential contender, people said the same things. They're like, oh, he is Trump. He's worse than Trump in the media. I mean, like, he's worse than Trump because of this or that. He's just as bad, but he's in sheep's clothing. So I don't think it matters how much he is or is not like Trump. They're going to use the same attack line as they did on Trump because that's basically all they've been doing for the past few years. He obviously isn't known to make some of the kind of off-the-cuff, insane people. Like, Trump is insanely funny. He just says stuff and he captures people's attention and can also make people very upset. But he doesn't worry. He's not measured at all in what he says. And DeSantis is not like that.
No, I don't think DeSantis has I don't know if you call it curb appeal, the charisma for some, and I guess disdain for others. But it is, I think, Kat, you hit on the right point, and Tommy, I'll go to you on this. I think it's absolutely true that if you sit there and make your calculated vote based on, well, DeSantis won't have the baggage Trump has, I think Democrats will go after DeSantis twice as hard because of that.
They're going to go after whoever the Republican is.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. The media is going to go after them. They're going to sabotage and torpedo whoever the nominee is. However, the calculation that conservatives, GOP, Republicans, ultra megas, whatever you want to call us, there's a lot of us, and we have kind of different factions of this party. But the calculation we're going to have to make is not so much about who's going to lead the country better. I think that they would be very similar in their approach in the White House to leading the country. It's going to be who can win those states, who can win Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, Wisconsin, these states that we need to win. I think there's a lot of Republicans out there that love Donald Trump. They saw him in that CNN town hall and they said, that's my guy. But then when they're sitting there thinking about their vote, they're a little worried that with all of the sabotage that comes with Donald Trump, can he win independents? Can he win women? He did it in 2016. He didn't do it in 2020. He was kind of unable to do it in the midterms and in his endorsements and his advocacy. Can he do it in 2024? A lot of people are skeptical. Don't count the man out, but let's be realistic as well.
Yeah, I think don't count the man out is probably Trump's perennial campaign slogan, right? No matter what it is they throw at him, it's not that he's Teflon Don. It's basically that Trump is, it's all baked in. It's all a part of what Trump is, and it's part of the appeal. If DeSantis doesn't have that, but he also doesn't have necessarily the charisma, he basically has the policies in Florida. You know, back to you on this, is that enough?
Well, I would say Trump, of course, has this sui generis personality that can be very entertaining. He pulled off this massive upset in 2016. But the Republicans have suffered now 3 consecutive disappointing elections since then. 2018 was a loss, 2020 was a loss, 2022 was effectively a loss, at least compared to what it ought to have been, in my view. Whether Trump can all of a sudden right the ship and win back a bunch of people who have been repelled by him in 2024, I don't know. I think what DeSantis would try to argue against Trump, and we'll see if there's an appetite for this among Republican voters, is I achieve outcomes. And he actually gave a speech, DeSantis did earlier today in Iowa. He's going to do another event coming up later this evening. But here's a quote from DeSantis today. He said, at the end of the day, governing is not about entertaining. Governing is not about building a brand or talking on social media and virtue signaling. It's ultimately about winning and about producing results. And I think that is both the message he wants to present for himself, and it is a not so subtle dig, I think, at the frontrunner in this race, Donald Trump.
You know, it's not subtle at all. We'll move on to the topic of the day that probably everyone is thinking about, at least hearing about, and that's what's going on at the border. Title 42 ended. We've seen the images all week. We've had reporters down there. Tommy, you've been to the border. I want to read this to you. I want to get all of you to weigh in on this. But this is the Washington Post cover today. It says, at the border, a reset but no surge. And then here's the quote from the article. It says, interviews with migrants waiting on the Mexican side suggested that U.S. threats to ramp up deportations starting Friday spurred many to cross before, not after, Title 42's expiration. Unlawful crossings topped 10,000 per day this week, the highest levels ever. I think that part of this is what Texas has done as well, is it not?
Let's be very clear about what's happening at our border. It is a choice. We know, and I know, because I've been there under Donald Trump, that it can be secured because Donald Trump was able to pretty much get there in less than 4 years. What is happening at our border is not a crisis. It's not just a blunder, which is what the left wants to make it seem like, oh, you know, Joe just hasn't found his footing at the border. No, he absolutely has, whereas puppeteers have. This is a choice. They want to let as many people in as possible, and they're going to do it in a way that they can find the most politically convenient to excuse it away or validate it. But make no mistake, what they're doing is very purposeful here, and the American people ought to be very upset, and legal immigrants ought to be hopping mad at the fact that these people are barging into our country. They're getting cell phones, they're getting hotel rooms, they're getting bus tickets, plane tickets. They are being dispersed into communities, largely, if not at all, vetted. This is a national security disaster, and it has all been done by choice, by design.
Kat, if Donald Trump secured the border, which a lot of people say he did, I think a lot of Americans felt that way by the end of his presidency. Ron DeSantis is very strong on the border, but that's another issue where the two of them, really, Ron DeSantis can't say he's going to be better on the border than Donald Trump because we saw what he did. But here's him talking about the border today.
What bugs me about it is you see the carnage that happens at these border towns. You see the carnage with the drugs and communities. Don't let anyone tell you if you're not a border town that this isn't affecting you. I've met mothers throughout Florida who have lost children because of fentanyl overdose. And if we had a secure border, a lot of that wouldn't happen. And yet the media doesn't really care about it. A lot of the left, they try to ignore it. A lot of them welcome this. This is their vision.
Can Ron DeSantis win on a border message against Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, not all of that is completely accurate. The fentanyl mostly comes in through legal points of entry. I think it's, 0.02 or even less % of illegal immigrants, were found with fentanyl. But there's certainly, that's not to say that the situation is not a disaster on the border, because it absolutely is. I think that there is a lot of, talking back and forth, and ultimately it's going to be Congress that has to solve this. And I think that, people are they're so interested in posturing and not wanting to do anything about it. Title 42, it was a COVID emergency thing, and regardless of how you feel about a law, I think it's most important to not allow the government to be able to abuse power. And the COVID emergency has been not a thing for a very long time. But the immigration system that we have in place right now was built in the 90s, and it's not meant to handle this kind of influx of people. I think people who want to come here and work, that should be easier to come here legally. If you want to come here and work and you're not violent, definitely agree that we need to stop all of the incentives, like the free stuff for people who come over here illegal, or for, people in general. The welfare state is massive.
I think the border has the potential to be a big topic. It'll be, I guess, serendipitous if Donald Trump wins again talking about the border, because I think he'd have the better record this time around.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.